O kia ora kōrua, kia ora tātou katoa. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, kia kōrua I hara mai nei ki Wanganui a mātou I tēnei pō. So kia ora, I'm pleased to welcome you here to the Council Chambers tonight to have a discussion about the future elections that are coming up. I thought just given that there's only a few of us here tonight, we'll keep things pretty light and informal, do a quick round of introductions. We've got a bit of a presentation to take you through, and happy to take questions as we move through the presentation. You're okay with that? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a bit of a tag team with myself and Heather, but if you've got a burning question any part, as we move through, just sing out, holler out, we'll do our best to answer it. So my name is James Baity. I come from the coast, I come from Whangarā, and I'm the Director of Internal Partnerships. So that mightn't mean very much to you, but part of my brief is that I look after, alongside Heather, the governance and democracy side, and so elections falls into our portfolio. Heather's got a more formal part of the process as the Deputy Electoral Officer, but my team, being Heather's team, looks after our elected members. I've got a whole pile of other little bits and pieces that sit in my role, but superfluous for tonight, so I won't labour that. Right, we'll get into it. But before I do, I'll let Heather introduce herself, and maybe we'll hear from you guys as well.
Kia ora, I'm Heather Conn, and I have been the Deputy Electoral Officer here at Council since 2014. In that time we've had 2 by-elections, and this will be our my third election. And it's a stressful but highly entertaining and interesting time. And we look forward to our 3 yearly cycles. I'd also like to introduce Kim. Kim Everett is our Senior Communications Advisor, so she's been helping us with the campaign and the presentations and all the collateral that goes with it.
So local government, it's a bit of a beast, and what we hope to do tonight is give you some insights into not just local government generally, but what's sort of peculiar about Gisborne District Council. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. We're what we call a unitary, which makes us a bit different. There's only a few unitary councils in the country, 6 in total, I believe. But our purpose in local government is defined by law. So you'll hear a lot about the LGA, the Local Government Act 2002. It sets out basically how local governments can operate. In that act, it's clear that the purpose of local government is to enable local democratic decision-making and action on behalf of communities, and to promote the social, environment, economic and cultural wellbeing. So that's that 4 wellbeing model. You might hear it referred to as the quadruple bottom line. It features quite a lot in government speak and government planning, and we're no different. Previous government removed that quadruple bottom line, and the current government brought it back in. So we've had it disappeared for a bit and it came back, but a lot of councils actually still operated under that quadruple bottom line framework for planning purposes anyway. So a lot of them kept it in their long-term plans, etc. But that's kind of our purpose in a nutshell, as defined by the Act. The Act also sets out a number of key principles for local authorities and how they operate: transparency and accountability. A lot of these won't be a surprise to you. They're very much how businesses should be operating anyways. Having regard to communities' interests now and in the future. Impact on wellbeing, so those 4 wellbeings that I just spoke about. Ensuring that Māori have ability to contribute to decision-making processes. So in the Local Government Act and other pieces of legislation that we operate under, there are various sections, various clauses that require us to interact with Māori and involve Māori in decision-making and ensure that they have the capacity to do so. Collaboration with our other local authorities. So there's a term you might hear a lot in local government called LASS, L-A-S-S, which is a local authority shared service. We're a part of a local authority shared service called BOPLAS. Effectively, that's where a number of councils come together and use their combined power, if you like, to broker deals and get bang for buck effectively, ensuring that we're able to spend the ratepayer dollar wisely when we're doing different types of procurements and engaging different services or buying stuff. So that's a good example of that. Commercial transactions and sound business practices. Prudent stewardship, both in terms of finances and effective planning, and a sustainable development approach as well, making sure that we've got well-being and the environment and future generations in mind when we're doing planning. Local government's been around for a long time, and we may come and go, but there'll still be some form of democracy at a local level, let's hope. Ensuring that we're doing what we can now with the future in mind. So that's kind of that whole sustainable development approach. As I mentioned before, we're a unitary. So unitary authorities have both the responsibilities of a local authority and a regional council. Just by way of example, in Hawke's Bay, you'll see that they've got like Napier City Council, Hastings District Council, Whitehall District Council, Central Hawke's Bay. Those are local authorities. They also have Hawke's Bay Regional Council, which provides all those regional functions. But we are that all wrapped up in one. So we're one of 6 unitary councils in the country. Just by way of example, regional councils have the responsibility for like biosecurity, civil defence, sort of regional transportation and transportation generally, resource management, so that regional space for resource management and river management. Local authorities, they deal a lot with sort of environmental health and safety stuff. You've got, sort of key roading infrastructure as well in there, your building consents, environment, etc. So we as a unitary, we're it in the whole of Tairāwhiti. Has its pros and its cons, I might say. So great from sort of communication and engagement perspective that you're dealing with one local authority, and that sort of cuts to the chase in lots of different respects. So that's us. I'm going to talk a little bit later on, but we're in the future of our arrangements as a democracy here in Tairāwhiti, we're moving towards a 2-ward structure. So we'll have a Māori ward and a general ward. Currently we've got a 5-ward structure, so we've got the city ward with 4 rural wards. So that's been reviewed in what we call a representation arrangement, and things are changing in the future. Heather's going to talk quite a lot about that later on in this presentation. We've got staff sort of at the moment, we've got a head count of about 374. FTE, that's about 329 staff. Tairāwhiti's got a population over 50,000. Some of the stuff you may know already, but that's sort of who we are as a unitary authority. This picture just shows you how we break our activities up across council. So internal partnerships, that's my team. In there I've got health and safety, I've got people and capability or HR, I've got the legal services, Heather's team and democracy and support services. I've got another big section called information services, which includes like GIS land information. It's got all our IT in it. It's got information management, which includes like records and archives and generally information, be it digital or otherwise. I've got business solutions and intelligence. So those are our teams that help find nifty solutions to things and interpret data. I've also got cultural activities, which is our libraries and theatres that sit in my space as well. So we've got Māori engagement, sort of engagement and Māori responsiveness is a new hub that we've brought into the organisation last year. Finance and performance, so got all the financial gurus on board. Environmental services and protections, so those are the sort of largely the compliance and enforcement space of council. Community lifelines, that's infrastructure services, our 4 waters, environment and roading, and all those wonderful things. Livable communities, so that's sort of parks and open spaces, cemeteries, and so forth. Yeah, that's kind of our structure, if you like, and again, all operating in that unitary council environment. So not just sort of those territorial duties, but regional duties as well. Yeah, I mean, we partner with lots of different places, but just the Botplace example I gave you is our Bay of Plenty friends, so Whakatane or Pōtiki and through that area. But I mean, particularly in the regional space, we do a lot of partnering even with Hawke's Bay. So we've got like a Hawke's Bay Regional Council staff member who's housed in this organisation, for example. So some of that partnering might just be on a project by project basis. And other things like bigger things might be through, like a formal structure being a local authority shared service.
We've also joined the Waikato LAS for our regional council partnership.
Yeah. But in this day and age, it's not just geographically that we're connecting with people. We work with multiple councils across the nation on lots of different things in lots of different fronts, particularly in the planning space. So those are just some examples. Cool. Okay, this is just outlining some of our major projects. These are the only projects that we do at council, but these are the big ticket items. These won't come as a surprise to you either. So we've got the Kiwa pools, which we hope to open in March next year. Everything's well on track, so we're heading in that direction. The wastewater treatment plant upgrades, drain-wise. So these are big spends, like 44.5 million and 31.3 million. Drain-wise is 42.7 million. We've got the Navigations Tairāwhiti project, walking and cycling, the Waipawa flood control scheme, there's another 33 million. The Waingake transformation, another 17 million. And Township Plans, which have had an increased budget in their long-term plan as well. So the Township Plans, as the name might suggest, developing plans for specific townships around Tairāwhiti. I should note that this isn't all ratepayer funded as well. We've attracted a lot of external funding to assist in these projects. Some have the ability to attract funding and other things not so much, but we're certainly getting very good at trying to bring in external funding to assist us, particularly with infrastructure projects where we can.
And those aren't an annual spend, it's the total cost of the project.
Yeah.
Would the skate park be a major?
The skate park has been externally
funded, yeah.
So it's the Tairāwhiti Adventure Trust project.
Not part of this.
Yeah.
Cool. This is just again highlighting, probably I've covered this mostly with that big circle that we showed earlier, but this is just how the services again are broken down, particularly as they're presented in our long-term plan. We have to be financially prudent, no surprises there. So there's lots of rules governing financial prudence, not least of which are various accounting standards, etc. But we also have what we call a financial strategy. So councils across the country are required to consult on and put in place a financial strategy and a revenue and financing policy as well. And these are the key directions that fall out of those sorts of documents. So we've got to focus on critical activities and infrastructure as part of our financial strategy, keeping rates as affordable and as practical as possible. So we set limits on rates and council can't go above those limits. So for example, you'll know that 6.5 for the first 3 years of the long-term plan is quite well known in terms of the limit on the rates that council can generate as an increase. We have a desire to increase the alternative avenues in terms of revenue as well. Maintain our debt prudently. So I've got some figures that I'm going to mention later on. Ensure beneficiaries of the services pay for the costs, so their intergenerational equity is applied there as well. And growing our rates database. I think one of the things I think about when I think about Tairāwhiti is we're a big rohe and we've got lots of key infrastructure, principally roading. The comparator that I give people is if you think about Napier City Council, similar size population, maybe a little bit less, They ain't got half the roading network we look after, but they've got a similar rating base, right? So when you're thinking about the difficulties that we might be facing as a community, they're quite distinct and quite different from, let's say, Napier, who might comparatively have a similar population. But it's a very condensed area. They're only a small locality compared to our massive region with lots of metalled roads. So just things to think about when you're considering entering the foray of local politics in Tairāwhiti. I don't want to put you off, of course, we need people to stand. Right, so budget-wise, so just some information on how our projects, what our projects and activities cost, and where the money will come from. So overall increases, as I mentioned, is 6.5. So we're looking at $70.4 million external debt. This is in the forthcoming financial year. This is 1 July start of 42 million. We're looking at an OPEX and CAPEX, so operational expenditure at 121 million and capital expenditure at 99.2 million there in the forthcoming financial year. So we have an asset base of about 2.5 billion. Operational expenditure, everyone understands the difference between OPEX and CAPEX. So CAPEX, you're sort of thinking your bricks and mortar and all the costs that go into asset development, asset improvement, etc. And OPEX is I'm an OPEX. Salary is a good example of operational expenditure. Okay, what this graph shows you is how that spend is split up across the activities. So, not surprising, a big chunk of council's expenditure is on roading and footpaths. We're not the only council that has a graph that looks like this, incidentally. Regional leadership and support services, so the council and the team that we have to keep things ticking over. Livable communities is at 10%, environmental services. So this just gives you a good snapshot on a percentage basis of how the funding, that 121 million that I talked about earlier, operational expenditure, because this is just OPEX, how that's divvied up. So that's the pie, if you like.
Sorry, I meant to ask earlier.
Sure.
What were your plans for the Gisborne Council plan for increasing money?
Increasing fund?
Increasing funds into the region.
So you mean growing the rating base, or do you mean other?
Are you planning on growing the rating? Yeah, so bringing in more people.
More people are coming.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Which will grow the rating base, and as well as that,
I mean, councils only have certain levers, so obviously, one thing is to grow your rating database, increasing rates, although council sets limits on that. Increase your revenue streams, which I talked about in terms of that financial strategy, whether that's through attracting more external funding or fees and charges, for example, in a more user-pay system. So,
and our council-controlled trading organisation
yeah, we
as
have
well.
we have a council-controlled trading organisation which pays a dividend. So there's some levers there, but it's just a case of managing those in a prudent way, and ensuring at the same time that you've got community affordability in mind. A lot of the external funding that we would attract doesn't come by itself. It might require that you come with some as well. We've got an example at the moment that we're working with that we can attract some external funding, but we might have to put up the first 10% of it or something like that, for example. That's right. So when you get that 10%, that becomes an issue, right? That you have to work through. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but those are some of the key sort of, levers, as you say, that council can call on to afford things.
Yeah, I mean, rates increase.
Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry. What percentage of money funding would come from the government? From
Don't know if we've got that.
Well,
who is your external funding?
So we can use apply to trusts. We're a beneficiary of one of Trust Tairāwhiti's beneficiaries. We apply to other organisations. The Ministry for the Environment provides us a lot of external funding for projects.
Yeah, a lot of our funding,
Yep.
let's say in the roading environment, so that 28% of operational expenditure is a good example. We have what we call a FAR rate, which is where Waka Kotahi provides, a portion of the funding required for roading. A good example at the moment would be the recent weather events that we went through and the sheer amount of damage that was experienced in our roading network. We can tap into emergency funding there, which it's not coming from your ratepayer pocket, it's coming from the other one, which is your taxpayer pocket. So those are some examples of external funding that councils can attract and do utilise. In saying that, there'll be opportunities that come up with other central government funding. Jobs for Nature, we've attracted some funding in that environment to support the Waingake project. We got the Provincial Growth Fund. We attracted money for that, both for the pools, the Kiwa pools build, and we've had money from that avenue go into the roading network as well, etc., etc. So there are pockets of money around, but they're not always sustainable, right? Because they're not going to be there every year. I think even the FAR rate's probably the most sustainable one of the lot. I don't know how long that's going to continue for, but there are other funds that we get which might just be a one-off and dry up eventually. So they're not necessarily a sustainable form of revenue to support the community and the infrastructure that we have, that we look after on behalf of the community on an ongoing basis. Yeah, cool, righto. Right, just briefly, I mentioned earlier that we have had a change in our electoral arrangements and our representation arrangements for Tairāwhiti. So principally what got this underway is that council decided in November 2020, 2021, yeah.
21.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a year way ahead of myself there, to introduce Māori wards. And what that meant is that we were required to conduct a representation review. So we went through that process to determine what the electoral arrangements should look like for Tairāwhiti. And after several iterations and after what is quite a cumbersome process on occasion, lots of community dialogue, lots of engagement. We had, I think, probably the best engagement in terms of numbers and submissions to any kaupapa that this council's undertaken on this particular process, the representation review and the introduction of Māori wards, etc. I think we got near on 1,200 submissions to the process. Anyways, long story short, where we ended up was 2 wards, and they both got the same boundaries, but for different purposes. So it's just one whole Tairāwhiti general ward and one whole Tairāwhiti Māori ward, but this is the split. So the general ward with the whole boundary of Tairāwhiti is 8 places available, so 8 elected members. And the Māori ward, again, same big boundary. There's 5 Māori ward elected members that we're looking for there. And in addition to the councillors, we've got the mayor. So there's 13 councillors plus the mayor is how it works in Tairāwhiti. Everyone votes for the mayor, no matter if you're on the Māori roll or the general roll, etc. I'll let Heather talk a bit more detail about the nuances in terms of standing in the respective wards, the rules, etc. She'll talk more to that in due course. Right, we have councils are born to have meetings, and lots of them. We're a beast in that respect. We've got, the council sits as council, and then we've got a committee structure. We have 3 committees of the whole, and then we've got various other statutory committees. Now, in the future, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, because it's the incoming council and particularly the mayor that decides on what that structure has a large say to a great extent, really, about what the structure will look at, advised by staff through the Chief Executive as their principal advisor about the makeup, but I can only talk to you about our current committee structure, which has worked fairly well, actually, by having committees of the whole. Committee of the whole, what does that mean? That's where council meets, all council meets, but under the banner of a different terms of reference in a different committee. But it's got all the councillors involved in the process. Quite helpful. I think it avoids the necessity of relitigating matters if you happen to not be on that particular committee and then it comes to council for adoption. So there are those sorts of benefits. The statutory committees that we've got regional transport, we've got Civil Defence Emergency Management Group, so we're a group for the purposes of civil defence. We've got the District Licensing Committee, we do have Hearings Committee if we need them as well.
Regulatory committee.
And a Regulatory Committee, etc. And we've got our all-important Audit and Risk Committee as well, which is independently chaired. So again, just giving you a sense of what our current makeup is in the committee structure space. And we have a governance work program. So what this is every committee will have basically what their work program is for the year. That goes back into the organisation, and Heather and the team basically keep people on to deadlines to do the reporting, and to ensure that we're getting through the work as determined by the governance work program, which is adopted by council as well. We have this whole system, technological system called Docs Assembler and Docs on Tap, which help us keep on top of all the work. Heather will talk more about wonderful agendas and all the rest of it a little bit later on. Righto. Okay, the role of the Mayor, no surprises there, to chair council, and she also chairs our Sustainable Tairawhiti and our Finance Performance Committee of the whole. Lead the development of council plans, policies and budgets, is the spokesperson for council, advocates on behalf of the community, so quite a strong advocate role there, and mayors are JPs as well. They have to go through they become JPs like effectively through election, but still have to go through the induction and training process as well. But I think mayors effectively get to skip the nomination process and all the rest of it. The role of all the other elected members, so to set the strategy and policy direction and to monitor the performance of council. Swear to represent the interests of the whole district. That becomes quite important later on. And so much as whether you're all coming through a general ward environment or a multi-ward environment, your role once elected is that. To employ the Chief Executive. So the council employs the Chief Exec. They are not my employers. They are my boss's employers. So they employ one person, this is in law, I'm not making this up. They employ one person, which is the Chief Executive, and the Chief Executive's role is to employ everyone else in the organisation. And abide and follow all the relevant legislation, policies and procedures. And there's a lot of them. I think at last count, council, particularly a unitary, we have something over 100 pieces of legislation that we operate under. There are three principal ones. So the Local Government Act, the RMA and the Local Rating Act. But there's lots of other pieces of legislation, the Civil Defence Act that we have to work under, and elections, Local Electoral Act, which is a big part of this process. Righto. Governance and management. So this is the role of the Chief Executive, is to implement the decisions of council. So when council makes a resolution, it often will say instructs the Chief Executive to, and then she instructs me. So that's one of the key roles, providing advice. So in law, in the Local Government Act, it's clear, it states that the Chief Executive is the principal advisor of council. So again, there's a team of people supporting the Chief Exec, but the Chief Executive is the principal advisor in law of the council. Ensuring responsibilities, duties and powers are properly performed and exercised, that we have effective and efficient management of the activities. So all those activities that I've mentioned earlier, the Chief Executive needs to ensure that they're all appropriately managed and done so efficiently and effectively. and maintain systems to enable effective planning and and accurate reporting of the financial and service performance. So we're audited annually, have big auditing processes. We have internal audit, so we have a team of people that conduct internal audits as well, and that's usually connected to risk. So it's risk-based, intelligence-led, effectively. Provide leadership for the staff of our council, and as I mentioned, employing the staff and negotiating the terms of employment with staff. Righto, how we work together. So we've got lots of different strategies and policies and codes that we work under in a local authority. So not too shortly after being elected, a council's required, is it within a 6 month time frame, council needs to adopt what they call the local governance statement. That's a statutory requirement, and it's quite a good read, actually. Really encourage people who are interested in local politics, and certainly if you're interested in standing as a councillor, to have a look at a local governance statement.
That'll be on our website. It's
on our website, and you can get it there. We've got a code of conduct, so council's conducted a review of its code of conduct last year. So we've got a set of tikanga, if you like, for the way that we operate, both in terms of behaviour and with one another, etc. We've got standing orders. So standing orders are basically the rules for governing a meeting. So they have like your points of order and there's lots of different rules in there, but it's the way that effectively, if you're working under standing orders, that you can manage your way through a meeting, whether, and there will be meetings that will require careful management. So that's why we have them. Talked about the Local Government Act, big chunky piece of legislation. We've got the council and committee delegations. So that committee structure that I mentioned, each of those committees has a terms of reference, and it outlines what the delegations are for that committee. So, this committee has the power to do this committee has the power to do that, so on and so forth. We've got a whole pile of staff delegations. So, I've got limits on the level of expenditure, for example, that I'm allowed to spend, in given transactions, etc., and various other pieces of legislation as well. There's lots of them, as I mentioned. Okay, future focus stuff. So, no big secret. Local government's going through quite a number of different reforms. Some of them have been in the pipe for a while, and some are new, and some are coming. And I guess, just wanted to highlight, there's some provincial growth opportunities, but we've got changing legislative environment. Civil defence is going through a change called the Trifecta Review. We've got environmental change coming in the form of national policy statements and national environmental standards. Everyone will know about Three Waters, so that's probably one of the biggest reforms that's happening at the moment.
Can I ask a question on that? What is our council's actual stand on that Three Waters? Any ideas?
There's been public statements about that, and where council stands on it.
It just seems to keep changing since they put the finger on.
Yeah, I think to begin with, it was because we just didn't have enough information, and I think a lot of local authorities felt that way, and so the stance was where the jury is out, so to speak, until we gather more information. I think we've been a bit more emphatic about that now. A lot of councils have come out and said that that there's still some more work to do in terms of whether it stacks up or not.
And that's some of the council stand.
Yeah, effectively.
The Mayor, I think it was last week, issued a press release which was quite clear about what council's position was, and it is a moving feast.
Very much is.
Yep. Yeah, lots of work happening in that space at the moment around the Three Waters reform environment. Future of local government review. So in addition to all the other reviews, there's a significant review of local government more broadly. So that work's underway now, and I anticipate that that'll pick up significantly in the not too distant future. There's plenty of RMA reforms. We've got climate change, trying to manage growth. We're in a post-treaty settlement environment, employment relations, really tight labour market at the moment, and we're included in that. Local authorities across the country have seen staff churn at the highest that it's probably been since the 70s. That's all on the back of COVID, and obviously the pipeline of immigration sort of switched off for a bit, and it's slowly starting back up, but people haven't been able to travel for 2 years, so there's a whole pile of people wanting to do the OE, so on and so forth. And funding and financing again, big questions for local authorities, and we're no different around, funding and our revenue and our financing. Righto. Any questions? This is a really important slide. We could talk for probably 10 days and still not get through this one. I think the reason we've included this more than anything is just to highlight that there's never been a greater time for great leadership in local authority. So I applaud you for being here tonight, even if it doesn't amount to the nomination. Putting yourself forward to assist communities through periods of change, I think, is a really big thing. I take my hat off to you for getting to this part of the process anyways. Okay. Righto, best for region. So just very quickly about this, I'm going to talk very briefly about Gisborne Holdings and GHL. So Gisborne Holding Limited, they're a council-controlled organisation. We're the sole owner. We've got a relationship also with Trust Tairāwhiti, which sort of operates as the regional development arm. Where Trust Tairāwhiti is concerned, council's responsible for appointing the trustees, and annually we also have to we work to adopt a statement of intent. So that happens on an annual basis, and Heather and the team assists with managing the appointment process. I mean, not the decision makers, but the I guess the administrative side of bringing a new of appointing trustees, in that process at the moment. Eastland Group are wholly owned by the trust. And there's been meetings of these groups in the past to talk about what is best for region. Just conscious of our part that we played there, and particularly with Gisborne, with GHL. So as I mentioned, it's a council-controlled organisation. It's wholly owned by GDC. It looks after an asset base on behalf of us and therefore the community of around $149 million. Included in that is Tauwhare Pārai Farms, the property holdings, including the council buildings. So this building's effectively owned by GHL, who are owned by us. The holiday park, the wash and go, the car wash there, all sitting under GHL. The constitution that we have, council does have the power to wind up if it needs to, and distributions or dividends are paid to GDC circa $2 million in the last financial year, by way of example. Righto, that's kind of my part, and I'm happy to take any questions now. If you think of any more, then I'm happy to take those. I know it seems like a bit to take in, but yeah, any questions, any partai?
It's a big beast.
No, thank you for that.
Cool, okay, I'll hand over to Heather.
Okay, now, elections. I've repeated the information that was in the pictorial, mainly because these are the issues that we all have to vote on. Okay, it's a word under the Act called issues. So that the first vote is for the mayor, the second vote is for the 13 councillors from the 2 wards, and that will be either from the general ward or the Māori ward, depending on what electoral roll you are on. So we're using the single transferable voting system, and this effectively means in those 2 general wards that representation of minorities, of women, of Māori, of Samoans, Tongans, could be a lot stronger than what it has in the past. So it is easier to get elected with the single transferable vote system if you are a minority. And what we're aiming for there is better representation of our community. So we have 2 electoral rolls. One is the resident electoral roll, and that will have, thanks James,
Correct.
that will have, that has currently got 33,200 electors on it. And to get onto that roll, you have to be a New Zealand citizen or a permanent resident. You've got to be aged 18 or over. You've got to have lived in New Zealand for 1 year or more and resided at an address for 1 month or more. To get on that roll, that's when you go to the Electoral Commission website. If you've changed address, you need to keep that updated. Those packs will be coming out to people on the roll pretty soon. And on that resident electoral roll, it will have what ward you're in. So whether you're in the Māori ward or whether you're in the general ward, that will be against your name in the roll. We also have a ratepayer electoral roll of currently 82 electors. These are for people who own family holiday homes, businesses, government departments, trusts, people like that can have 1 vote, and they can only vote for the mayor and for the ward that they are in.
So, for example, if you own property in Gisborne but you live in Auckland, you can enrol as a non-resident ratepayer or ratepayer elector, we call them, and you have a right to vote here in the Gisborne or the Tairāwhiti elections. It's an area that is underutilised across the nation. So there are lots of people who own properties outside of the district in which they live, where they have a right to vote but they haven't enrolled to do so. By way of example, we should have thousands on this roll, shouldn't we? We only have 82. We do a lot of promotion and stuff to encourage people to enrol, but we just, it's difficult to get the numbers up, and that is not peculiar of Gisborne or unique to Gisborne. It's a nationwide issue.
Yeah, that roll's updated every 3 years, and it's by application. It's not automatic. So if someone is on it, they have to actually send the form back in again. And it's not very user-friendly either, I have to say. Just on the resident electoral roll, at the moment you can only nominate yourself or change your status on the Māori electoral roll every 5 years, and it's usually after the census. There's some work going on with the Department of Internal Affairs currently to see if that could be more often to better reflect the difference between the national elections and the local elections, because a lot of people are on the roll for different reasons.
Yeah, so they're looking at potentially giving people the ability to change more often than 5 years. So that's currently in discussions and a review at the moment, and it could be as often as annually or whenever you like. So we'll see what happens in that space.
So to be a candidate for council, you need to be a New Zealand citizen. We do have people rock up wanting to put in nomination forms and they aren't New Zealand citizens. They've lived here forever, but they're not New Zealand citizens. You have to be over the age of 18 and enrolled on any parliamentary electoral roll. So if we take that as the Tim Shadbolt, I live in Auckland, I'm going to be Mayor of Invercargill example, it doesn't matter what electoral roll or where you live, you can stand in Gisborne. We had a mayoral candidate in 2019, I don't know if you can recall, Ross Morant. He lived in Auckland and stood as mayor in Gisborne. You can stand for multiple positions, for the mayor and council, but if you're elected as mayor, you must take up that position. A council employee can be elected as a mayor or a councillor, but when they are successful, they must resign as an employee before taking up the position.
Yeah. The other point, sorry, Heather, before you move on, and I don't know if you covered this off a bit later around, in terms of standing, you require the nomination of two people, or you get to that point later. Okay.
So candidates who become elected members and have spouses or themselves have contracts with council, if it's over 25,000 in 1 year, it will probably require approval from the Office of the Auditor General. And normally, if we've got an elected member whose spouse works at council, then we will advise the Officer of the Auditor General as well, because it can be perceived as a conflict. So the nomination process. Each nomination requires a nomination paper, $200 inclusive of GST as a deposit, a 150-word candidate profile statement. If any translations are in there, so for example, if you were Chinese and you wanted to have a translation, because it's not one of New Zealand's official language, it's part of the 150 words. If you are a Māori, you can do the whole 150 words, but it has to be a translation, not another statement. And that is because Māori is a New Zealand official language. You need a recent passport size colour photo. Some people choose not to put in their photos, but then you're not going to have any recognition round and in the community, or when you attend candidate evenings, that kind of thing. And evidence of citizenship. So everyone's got to bring in their passports or their birth certificates so that we can see that you're definitely a New Zealand citizen. Or if you've got citizenship through a citizenship ceremony, that certificate from there. Your nomination deposit is refunded if you are elected and if you poll 25% of the final quota in the single transferable vote system. And that's an automatic refunding, so you don't need to apply for it. We don't tend to use this in Tairāwhiti, but candidates can have an affiliation. I think we only had one candidate in 2019 who put that they were independent. So it's more the big centres like Wellington, Christchurch and Auckland who have Labour and National and Green affiliations. So we won't accept affiliations that might cause offence. So if it's a swear word or it's a campaign slogan, or if it's likely to confuse or mislead electors. Nominations open pretty soon on Friday the 15th of July, and they close Friday 12th of August. And in that nomination, you need to include your principal place of residence. So for example, the mayor, when she was a councillor, stood in the city ward but lived in the Tawhiti Uawa ward. So she would have to say, my principal place of residence is in the Tawhiti Uawa ward. And a statement on all the positions you're standing for. We're nearly there. Mm-hmm. Campaigning can start at any time. It can start now. And if you've been keeping an eye on the national news and the national newspapers, you'll see that Auckland's mayoral campaigns are very much underway. There's a display period, however, for election signs. And this is in our district plan, so it's not negotiable. And the reason that it's done is because the signs themselves can be quite full on in people's faces. So the display period starts on the Saturday the 27th of August, and they need to be removed by midnight on the night before election day, so that's 7th of October. You can have election signs on private property and on the 7 council-owned designated sites. And if you're erecting a sign on the state highway, you must get permission from Waka Kotahi. We have a policy on our election signs, and the policies, a lot of their policies about the sizing of the letters, and that's done for a safety reason. So if people are driving past, they're not peering at the signs and losing concentration on their driving. We do get lots of they're called hoardings, lots of complaints about our election signs. A lot of them come from the other candidates. So if they pick up that there's something wrong, they're on the phone and I have to go and do a drive-by, don't I, James? And then we get our compliance and monitoring people on it just to see if it's breached the district plan or not. You are responsible for your own election signs, not us. So I have had in the past, my hoardings have blown down. Can you put them back up? Sorry, no. Someone's put graffiti on my sign. Sorry, that's your problem. Okay.
Is there like a standardized format you can just reference and then just go to like the sign guy?
There's no standard format. That's completely up to you and your campaign.
But you said there was a standardized sign.
No, it's about the sign, the size of the lettering. That's all in your candidate information booklet. Yeah.
Yeah, just go to election hoardings
Yeah.
and it outlines what our policy is and what some of the parameters are.
Yeah, it gives you the rules. So, a bit of a change coming on election signs and advertisements. And so whatever you do, you have to show the authorising person. So that's usually your campaign manager. What's changing is the contact details. Because it's a safety reason, the bills before Parliament at the moment, some people get nervous about their physical address being on those signs, okay? So that is what is changing. However, you still will have to have an authorising person, and a good idea for contact details is that your campaign manager has another email account or a SIM card and a new phone number for the period of the campaign. The election advertisements and the authorising person excludes post tweets and messages because there wouldn't be room on any of it to put things in.
So you would have noticed potentially on election hoardings in the past, it always had the statement, this sign is authorised by so-and-so. It might, a campaign manager of such and such address, and just put the whole thing down. What they're suggesting is that might be able to be changed now, so that just says, name the campaign manager and an email address, or campaign manager and a phone number, as opposed to sort of the physical address of someone. That just avoids any sort of potential harassment or anything of that nature. Yeah.
Thanks, James. The candidates or their agents, which is usually a campaign manager, must not collect voting documents from electors. You can't go round a rest home or your street saying, I'll take in your voting documents. It's an offence, okay? The only people that can do that are electoral officials. And we will go to those rest homes with our polling box, but we can do it. Not even the rest home managers can do it. You need to be mindful of election offences. There's a lot of detail in that in the booklet. The best example I can give you that actually didn't really get upheld, and it was quite public, so I've got no problems repeating it, was in 2016. Now, the incumbent mayor at the time, Meng, went to the NZEF every Thursday night. He's done it forever, and would always put $20 on the bar for the people that were there. He'd always done it, and he'd have a drink as well, obviously, or a juice, I don't know. And during the election campaign, it was a particularly nasty campaign, and one of the other mayoral candidates reported him into us for doing a thing called treating. So that's essentially it's buying votes. That went to the police. Mm-hmm. The police don't really like this kind of stuff, but they had to do their investigation, and the electoral officer had to as well. And they actually just advised him not to do it in the future, but because he'd done it for so many years, it really wasn't something that was new. But he had to stop doing it for that period of time.
So treating is I guess, giving something away for free in the hope of, or the potential of getting a vote. So the classic is, having a free sausage sizzle at one of your campaign rallies. Or no. They have, the example they might give if we were being trained would be like giving away free candy floss. Believe it or not, that's happened. When I've been an electoral officer, someone standing at the candy floss machine during a campaign rally handing out the old candy floss. So as Heather said, there's a good section in the handbook there on offences. I encourage you to praise yourself for those. You might be surprised on what might be an electoral offence.
Okay, so all positions have election expenditure limits, and this is very much population based. So the mayor can spend up to 30,000. If you're standing in the Māori ward, it's 14,000. If you're standing in the general ward, it's 20,000. And those limits include GST. You can't add, if you're standing as a mayor and a councillor, you can't have $50,000. You must only use the maximum of $30,000.
Just to be clear, this is your money and that of your donors, not council money. When I was an electoral officer at the conclusion of a campaign, someone rang up and said, can they get, when are they getting their costs reimbursed? I was like, what costs are those? Having spent around 5K. Just to be clear, this is your campaign money.
And your declaration of what has been spent and what has come in must be made by the end of this year, by December the 15th, I think it might be. Yeah,
so right? You have to fill in an electoral, like a declaration outlining what your costs are, and just also note that by law those are required to be published on our website.
And sit there for 3 years. So you can go back
you
onto
can go
our
and have a look
website
right
now
now
and
and
have
see
a look.
them from previous elections. Yeah.
So
and just also note that's whether you're successful or not.
Yeah. And again, if you don't do it, it goes to the police. Okay, so the Scrutineers one is really funny for us because our vote processing centre is based in Auckland. So if you want someone to be a scrutineer, and that's just to make sure that everything's above board, then the scrutineer must be appointed before noon, 7 October, and they must go to Auckland. So we don't tend to do this. I don't know if we've ever had a scrutineer, but I can assure you that the voting processing centre is like Fort Knox. No one's allowed cell phones. The system is absolutely rigorous. The votes are automatically counted with barcodes. It's a very, and we haven't had any real issues with it.
I think they're counted twice.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
So counted once, and then when we say counted, the machines do this, but they are in batches that I've seen. I've been to the same place that Heather's been. So it'll get like this person will process them here, and that is batch number such and such and such and such. It'll go to the other department, they count it as well, same batch number, and those two have to marry for it to be a solid count. Yeah, and if there are anything, like for example, people are filling this in with pen, if there's any discrepancy, an eye, a human eye is put over it. Yeah.
Okay. I was really impressed at how rigorous it was. Okay, so voting closes noon, 8th of October 2022. There will be progress results on this Saturday about 2 o'clock. All candidates they have a choice. So we'll either phone you or email you depending on what you tell me you want to do. James will be advising the successful mayor because our chief executive is unavailable at 2 o'clock on Saturday the 8th of October, she's told me. And I will be advising, me and my team will be advising everyone else. Those progress results go to the media and they go onto our website as well pretty much straight away. So the 100% votes counted happens on Sunday morning, but the special votes still have to be validated with the Electoral Commission. So basically it's to prove that people are on the roll when they've made a special vote. The final results are actually available Thursday, 13th of October 2022, but we have never had anyone differ from the progress results or the preliminary results. Might be different this year, probably will be, because I think that vote might be a bit closer. So you've got some resources, got your handbook, which you've got a copy of. The handbook contains a lot of the electoral legislation, but you can go onto the government's website if you're really into that. We suggest you attend a council meeting or watch the live stream. It's probably better to attend a meeting because you kind of get a feel of the nuances. You'll understand how standing orders are used, that kind of thing, and you'll see your competition around the table. But you can go onto our website and watch the live stream. Suggest you read the agendas and minutes. This is a big one because it's this council's 23rd of June's council meeting. It has got the annual plan in it, which is quite a few hundred pages. We try to keep the agendas down to 300 pages. We've had some that have been 600 or 700 in the past. So the agendas and minutes are on our website. Also, feel free to talk to any council staff member, or if you know of a councillor that's no longer standing, and it was in the paper last night, there are Councillor Dowsing, Councillor Burdett, Councillor Hughes, and we're not sure of anyone else at this stage. You can contact the electoral officer at any stage, but you won't get him, you'll get one of his team, and you can contact me directly. We're just going to show you a really short video, and this is from our retiring councillor, Isaac Hughes.
I'll call Isaac Hughes tōku ingoa, and I'm a Gisborne City Councillor. Initially from Tokomari Bay on the east coast, so I lived there for the first 18 years of my life and then moved to Gisborne to study and work. When COVID kind of restricted my overseas travel plans, I've always wanted to get involved in governance and politics to some degree. I thought this is the perfect opportunity to see what it's like and learn some things about it. One of the most rewarding aspects for me is being able to offer that youthful perspective. So at the moment, I think I'm the only councillor under 40, don't quote me on that. But yeah, just being able to offer a different perspective just through lived experiences and represent youth to some extent. Part of the reason I'm leaving is I want to be able to travel overseas. So I spent my kind of early 20s studying and working, so I never really had the overseas experience. Hopefully one day I'll come back to this table and offer some new perspectives and a little bit more experience.
What if you're elected? Prepare for a lot of reading. I'm not kidding, there's a lot of reading. We've slightly changed our induction. This is fluid. We're looking at the mayor having a team building few days in the first week following polling day, and that's without staff present. And then the week of the 17th of October to the 21st of October, staff will conduct an induction, and it's things from the long-term plan, health and safety, civil defence, a spatial plan, a whole lot of tools that you will find necessary in order to hit the floor running. The inaugural council meeting, the swearing in, is likely to start about 11 o'clock and will be the 27th of October at Te Poho o Raweri Marae. The first ordinary council meeting where you get stuck into business is the 24th of November 2002. Have you got any questions for either James or myself?
No, I think it's pretty clear on we get in, it's going to be very interesting.
Just a note too that councillors are they receive technically an honorarium, but these are funded roles. The rate at which elected members are actually remunerated is set by the Remuneration Authority, and they actually put out what we call a determination. Those are publicly available as well, so you can see.
They're in your book.
They're in your book. You'll see what those limits are. Again, depending on how things are structured post the election, there may be some change there, but effectively what you've got is an example of how things are funded currently. I don't know if we touched on it, but one other thing to note is Heather mentioned that you can stand sort of multiple issues. So you can stand as a councillor and the mayor, and if you get elected the mayor, you take up that role. You can't stand in both the general ward and the Māori ward at the same time, just so you're not confused. So when we talk about multiple issues, it's the general ward and the mayoral issue, or the Māori ward and the mayoral issue. When we talk about issues, so that the mayor seat is an issue, the general ward is an issue, the Māori ward is an issue. It's just a technical term we use, but that's just one of the things you need to be aware of. You need the nomination of 2 people from the ward that you're standing in.
And one thing I'd strongly suggest on that particular one is the electoral roll sits out in customer services. You can't take it away. But before you ask someone to be your nominator, come and have a look and see what ward they're in. Just don't, or even if they've got to be on the roll.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised, especially last minute. We've got people coming in with nominations on the Friday.
Right to the wire.
And they're wrong, and I have to send them away because we can't accept it.
And we are 100%. This is a legal process, and it's contentious anyways. It's an election, but closing it when we say 12 noon, I'm literally standing there, being like 10, 9, 8, 7. So we close off hard. And Heather's right, we get people coming, this is country over, thinking, you've got your nomination form sorted, they're either not on the roll or they've got an old address. We have to match with what is on the roll that we have printed out. And so if someone says, I've already moved from that, you haven't updated it. I'm like, no, you haven't updated it. We don't update your details. So those are just some tricks of the trade, so to speak. Make sure that the people that are nominating you are both on the roll and that your details match what's on the electoral roll when they're doing the forms.
You can always phone in with that too, because it's just a question of picking up the roll and telling you.
Thank you. You've been very clear, explained it really well. I've got a good understanding of what we may get into.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Again, if you think of any questions, Heather and I are here. We're at your disposal. Flick stuff our way. Do encourage you to have a look through your handbook first. Most stuff's pretty captured there. Those are being worked up over several election cycles. Now,
and feel free to take more packs if you know
we've
other
got
people.
more packs there, and I think we've got posters and stuff down the back which you're welcome to take and distribute. Tell your friends and whānau, get involved, stand for elections. But
a lot of people don't show their hand.
Right.
Yeah.
So you find, like, for example, in 2019, between 7 and 9 people turned up, and 38 put their hands into the ring. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Oh.
Yeah.
What's the salary
So basic salaries at the moment, it will go up after the election, is 44,000. It's a 22.5 hour per week it's been sized at.
Unless
Some
you're
weeks
the
are
mayor,
busy,
then
others
it's
won't.
like
Full-time.
full-time and
And
it's
it's 157.
150 something, 160?
157, less the use of a vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're the chair of the committee, for example, and depending on our structure, then you might get more. Yeah, it's in the book there,
Yeah.
just by way of example.
Deputy Mayor gets more, Deputy Mayor gets about 65. And we provide electronic devices as well, because we're trying to get rid of the
Paper.
paper.
We're doing a pretty good job of it too, I might add.
Oh, thank you very much for that.
No, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming along.